Millionaire finds his daughter hugging a homeless woman on the street and shouts, "Let go of my daughter." When he discovers who that woman is, he is horrified. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Chapter 1. The Encounter. Alexander Sterling's polished Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble steps of Le Petit Jardin, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The maitre d' had already memorized his usual table, the corner booth, with the best view of Central Park, perfectly situated to conduct business while maintaining privacy. Today's lunch meeting had secured another multi-million-dollar deal, adding yet another jewel to his real estate empire's crown. The autumn. Breeze carried the scent of success, a fragrance he'd known intimately for the past 3 decades. At 55, Alexander commanded respect wherever he went, his silver-streaked dark hair and tailored suits a testament to power and privilege. He checked his Patek Philippe watch, a habit more ceremonial than necessary. Time had always been on his side. That was until this moment. The sight before him shattered his carefully constructed world like a hammer through glass. 20 feet ahead, on the busy sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, his daughter Catherine was kneeling. Not the elegant, poised Catherine who graced charity galas and society pages, but a Catherine he'd never seen before, vulnerable, emotional, and worst of all, embracing a homeless woman. "Catherine," his voice cut through the afternoon bustle, sharp as a blade. "What do you think you're doing?" His daughter's head snapped up, those familiar green eyes, so like her mother's, wide with defiance. "Dad, please, she needs help." Alexander's jaw clenched as he strode forward, his presence parting the crowd of onlookers like Moses through the Red Sea. The homeless woman's threadbare coat hung from her thin frame, her matted hair obscuring her face. The sight of his daughter's pristine cashmere sweater touching those filthy rags made his stomach turn. "Get up this instant," he commanded, reaching for Catherine's arm. "No." Catherine pulled away, her voice trembling but determined. "You can't. Just ignore human suffering because it doesn't fit into your perfect world." The woman began to retreat, shuffling backward on worn shoes. Something about her movement, the way she curved her shoulders inward, triggered a distant memory in Alexander's mind. An echo of grace in her gestures, even in desperation. "Wait," Catherine pleaded with the woman. "Please don't go. Let us help you." The woman paused, and slowly, so slowly it seemed time itself had stopped, she raised her face to meet Alexander's gaze. The world tilted on its axis. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. They had haunted his dreams for 20 years, eyes that had once looked at him with love, then fear, then nothing at all when they told him she was gone forever. Victoria. His wife. The woman he'd built his entire life around, whose absence had carved a void he'd filled with ambition and power. The woman whose memory he'd preserved in a pristine bubble of tragedy, now standing before him in rags, very much alive. "Impossible," he whispered, his carefully cultivated control crumbling like ancient ruins. Victoria's eyes widened with recognition, then filled with something darker, something that made his blood run cold. Before he could move, before he could speak, she turned and disappeared into the crowd with surprising agility. "Wait!" Catherine called out, starting to follow, but Alexander's iron grip finally caught her arm. "Let her go," he ordered, his voice hoarse. "Dad, she needs help. Why are you always so—" Catherine stopped mid-sentence, studying his face. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." A ghost. If only it were that simple. Ghosts were predictable, confined to memories. And photographs. This was something far more dangerous, a walking, breathing piece of his past that threatened everything he'd built. "Get in the car," he managed, gesturing to his waiting Mercedes. "But now." Catherine recoiled at his tone but complied, years of conditioning winning over her newfound rebellion. As his driver held the door open, Alexander's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Victoria was alive. Victoria was homeless. Victoria was here. But the question that terrified him most was, why now? Inside the car's leather-cushioned sanctuary, Catherine watched him with growing concern. "Dad, you're scaring me. Do you know that woman?" Alexander loosened his tie, suddenly feeling trapped in his custom-made armor. The city streets blurred past the tinted windows as his carefully ordered world began to unravel. That woman, his Victoria, hadn't just disappeared into the crowd. She'd looked at him with purpose, with recognition, with something that felt dangerously like triumph. "Driver," he called out, his voice steadier than he felt, "take us to the office. And Catherine," he turned to his daughter, seeing, for the first time, how much she resembled her mother. "We need to talk about your mother." Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. The Sterling Tower cast long shadows across Manhattan's bustling streets, its gleaming facade a monument to Alexander's success. But today, as the elevator carried them to the penthouse office on the 60th floor, that success felt hollow. Catherine stood beside him, her arms crossed, questions burning in her eyes. The doors opened to a reception area where his executive assistant, Margaret, rose immediately. One look at his face and she knew. No interruptions, no calls, no exceptions. Alexander guided Catherine into his office, the space that had witnessed countless victories now feeling like a cage. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the leather chairs facing his desk. Catherine chose to stand. "Dad, what's going on? You look like you're about to collapse." Alexander walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the empire he'd built. How many times had he stood here, believing he was untouchable? Now, the very foundations seemed to tremble. "That woman," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "was your mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine's sharp intake of breath seemed to echo off the walls. "What? But Mom died, the accident. You told me. I told you what I believed to be true." Alexander turned to face his daughter, seeing the color drain from her face. 20 years ago, your mother disappeared. My father showed me police reports, witness statements, evidence that she'd been in a fatal accident. I believed him. I believed everything. Catherine sank into the chair, her legs giving way. "You're saying that homeless woman that was my mother. My mother is alive." Alexander's hands gripped the back of his chair until his knuckles turned white. "Apparently so." "And you had no idea? All these years you never questioned it?" Catherine's voice rose with each word, disbelief turning to anger. "How could you not know? How could you just accept it?" "Because that's what we were taught to do." Alexander's fist came down on the desk, making Catherine jump. "In this family, we accept what we're told. We maintain order, we protect the legacy." "The legacy?" Catherine stood up, her eyes flashing. "Is that what this is about, your precious reputation? My mother, your wife, is alive and living on the streets, and you're worried about the family legacy?" Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of vulnerability he'd never allow anyone else to see. "You don't understand. If she's alive, if she's been out there all this time, there's more to this than we know." "Then let's find out." Catherine began pacing the office. "We have to find her. We have to help her. We have resources, connections." "No." Alexander's voice was firm. "We do nothing. Not yet." "How can you say that? She's my mother. And she's my wife." The words exploded from him with unexpected force. "Do you think I don't want answers? Do you think I don't want to know why she's been living like that while we've been here in our tower of privilege? But we have to be careful. If she's alive, if this wasn't an accident, then everything we believe about our family might be a lie." Catherine stopped pacing, her face a mirror of the determination he'd seen in Victoria's eyes countless times. "Then maybe it's time we learned the truth." A knock at the door interrupted them. Margaret entered, her usual composure slightly shaken. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see immediately." She handed him a tablet, open to a financial news website. The headline made his blood freeze. "Sterling Real Estate Empire Faces Federal Investigation. Anonymous source reveals decades of financial irregularities." Alexander's eyes scanned the article, each word a nail in his coffin. Offshore accounts, falsified documents, suspicious transactions, all traced back to the foundation of his empire. But what caught his attention was a quote from an unnamed source. "The truth has been buried for 20 years. It's time for the sterling legacy to crumble." He looked up at Catherine, who was reading the article over his shoulder, her face pale with shock. This was no coincidence. Victoria's appearance, this article, it was all connected. His wife hadn't just survived, she'd returned with a purpose. "Dad?" Catherine's voice trembled. "What does this mean?" Alexander set the tablet down carefully, his mind already calculating moves and countermoves. "It means, my dear, that your mother isn't the only ghost coming back to haunt us." Chapter 3. Shattered Illusions. The next morning, Sterling Tower buzzed with nervous energy. News of the federal investigation had spread like wildfire through the financial district, and Alexander's phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. But in his private office, he sat in uncharacteristic stillness, staring at an old photograph he'd kept locked in his desk for 20 years. Victoria smiled back at him from behind the glass, radiant in her white summer dress, her arms wrapped around a young Catherine. The picture had been taken at their Hampton estate, just weeks before she vanished. Back then, he'd thought they had everything: love, success, a perfect family. Now he wondered if any of it had been real. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Harrison from the board is here." "Send him in." James Harrison, his oldest friend and the company's lead counsel, entered with a grave expression. "Alex, it's worse than we thought. The FBI has frozen several of our overseas accounts. They're claiming evidence of systematic fraud dating back to the company's founding." Alexander barely registered the words. His mind was still trapped in the past, replaying every moment with Victoria, searching for signs he might have missed. "James, what do you remember about Victoria's accident?" Harrison's expression shifted subtly. "Alex, we need to focus on the present. The company is under attack." "Answer the question." Alexander's voice carried an edge that made even Harrison flinch. I remember what your father told us. The car accident in Connecticut, the fire." Harrison loosened his tie. "But I never saw the body, none of us did." "Because there was no body." Alexander stood, pacing to the windows. "She's alive, James. I saw her yesterday right here in Manhattan." Harrison sank into a chair, his legal briefcase sliding from nerveless fingers. "That's impossible. Your father confirmed." "My father lied." Alexander turned sharply. "The question is, what else did he lie about? These financial irregularities they're investigating, they all trace back to his time as CEO. Alexander, think carefully about what you're suggesting. Richard Sterling built this company from nothing. He was your father." "And Victoria was my wife." Alexander's fist struck the desk. "My father convinced me she was dead while she was out there somewhere living on the streets. Why? What was he hiding?" A soft knock interrupted them. Catherine stood in the doorway, her face pale but determined. "I think I might know." Both men turned to her as she entered, clutching a laptop. "I've been up all night, going through old company records. Look at this." She set the computer on Alexander's desk, pulling up a series of documents. 3 weeks before Mom disappeared, she was appointed to the board of our charitable foundation. She had full access to all the foundation's financial records. Harrison leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. The Sterling Foundation? But that was just a tax write-off, a way to... He stopped abruptly, catching himself. "A way to what, James?" Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. Catherine continued, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "The foundation received massive donations from some of the biggest names in politics and business. But look at where the money went." She pulled up a spreadsheet. "These companies, these transactions, they're all shell corporations. The money didn't go to charity at all. It was being laundered." Alexander felt the room spin. The foundation had been his father's pet project, his supposed legacy of philanthropy. But if Catherine was right... "Dad," Catherine's voice softened. "I think Mom found out. I think she discovered what Grandfather was doing, and he She couldn't finish the sentence. Harrison stood abruptly. "This is dangerous territory, Alex. Some of the names on these donation lists, they're powerful people. If this gets out..." "If this gets out," Catherine's eyes flashed. "My mother spent 20 years on the streets because of these people, because of what our family did." "Catherine," Alexander warned, but his daughter wasn't finished. "No, Dad, you always taught me that the Sterling name meant something, that we were better than everyone else because we earned our success. But it was all built on lies, wasn't it? On other people's money, on corruption, on destroying anyone who got in the way, even your own wife." The truth of her words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Everything he'd believed in, everything he'd taught his daughter, it was all a carefully constructed facade. And Victoria. God, Victoria had tried to expose it all. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When he opened it, his heart stopped. There was no message, just an image, a young Victoria sitting at his father's desk holding up a stack of documents to the camera. Her face showed not fear, but fierce determination. "She kept evidence," he whispered. "All these years she was gathering evidence." Catherine moved to his side, looking at the photo. "Then the investigation, the leaked documents. It's her, isn't it? Mom is finally fighting back." Alexander closed his eyes, remembering the look in Victoria's eyes when he saw her on the street. Not defeat, but victory. She hadn't been hiding all these years. She'd been waiting, planning, preparing for this moment. "James," he said, quietly, "I need every record we have of my father's dealings with the foundation. Everything. Alex, think about what you're doing. If you pursue this..." "My father destroyed my wife's life to protect his secrets. He made me believe she was dead. He made my daughter grow up without a mother." Alexander's voice hardened with resolve. "I don't care what it costs. I want the truth." Chapter 4. The Hidden Path. Victoria Maxwell, once Victoria Sterling, stood at the window of her penthouse office in Brooklyn, watching Manhattan's skyline glitter across the river. The same skyline she'd watched for 20 years from cardboard boxes and sheltered doorways, plotting her return. Her reflection in the glass showed a different woman now. Gone were the matted hair and ragged clothes. In their place stood an elegant figure in a tailored suit, her silver-streaked dark hair swept back in a sophisticated knot. The years of hardship had left their mark in the lines around her eyes, but they'd also forged her into steel. "The first domino has fallen," said a voice behind her. Marcus Chen, her partner in the investment firm they'd built together, handed her a tablet displaying news of the investigation. "Are you sure you want to proceed with Phase 2? Once we start, there's no going back." Victoria touched the screen tracing the Sterling Company logo. "I've waited 20 years, Marcus. I'm done hiding." And Catherine? Meeting her yesterday wasn't part of the plan. Victoria's composed facade cracked slightly. "She's beautiful, isn't she? So strong, so passionate. Even with everything Alexander and Richard did to control her, they couldn't crush her spirit." "She's not just Alexander's daughter anymore," Marcus warned. "She's asking questions, digging into the Foundation's records. If she discovers much too quickly. She deserves to know the truth." Victoria turned from the window, her heels clicking on the polished floor as she moved to her desk. "Besides, she's not just Alexander's daughter. She never was." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Does she know?" "No, but she will." Victoria opened her laptop, pulling up a secure folder. "Everyone will know everything soon enough. 20 years of evidence, Marcus. Every transaction, every bribe, every threat Richard Sterling made to build his empire. And now with the FBI involved..." Her phone buzzed, a text from one of their sources inside Sterling Tower. Alexander was demanding all records related to the Foundation. "He's looking into it," she murmured. "Just like I knew he would." "Victoria," Marcus's voice softened with concern, "you never told me. That day before Richard had you committed, why didn't you go to Alexander? Why didn't you show him what you'd found?" Victoria's fingers traced the edge of her desk, remembering that last day in Richard Sterling's office. "I tried, but Richard got to him first. He'd spent years molding Alexander into his image, teaching him that power was everything, that feelings were weakness. When I tried to tell Alexander about the corruption, about the foundation, she closed her eyes against the memory. Richard convinced him I was having a mental breakdown, that my accusations were delusions. And then? Then Richard's men came for me in the night. The doctors he paid diagnosed me with paranoid delusions. They kept me drugged, controlled. By the time I managed to escape, she gestured to the tablet displaying the Sterling investigation. The evidence was gone and I was legally dead. Marcus studied her face. But you found allies. You rebuilt the evidence. I had help. Victoria smiled slightly. Richard Sterling wasn't the only powerful man in New York, and some of his enemies were very interested in what I knew. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time with surveillance photos. Alexander and Catherine leaving Sterling Tower, heading to the company's record storage facility. They're looking for answers, Marcus observed. Let them look. Victoria pressed a button on her desk phone. Janet, please proceed with the transfer we discussed. It's time to show the Sterlings exactly what their empire is built on. As her assistant acknowledged the order, Victoria pulled up another file. On her computer, a DNA test from 25 years ago, taken just weeks before her wedding to Alexander. The truth that had started it all, the secret that had made Richard. Sterling decides she had to disappear. Catherine will hate me when she learns everything, she whispered. Marcus touched her shoulder gently. She'll understand. You did all this to protect her. Did I? Victoria looked up at her friend and partner. Or did I do it for revenge? Before Marcus could answer, Victoria's secure phone lit up with an incoming call. The number was blocked, but she knew who it was. Only one person had this number. He's alive, isn't he? She asked Marcus. Richard Sterling. He's been watching all along. Marcus nodded grimly. Our sources confirm it. He's been living in Switzerland, pulling strings from the shadows, but now that you've made your move, he'll come for Catherine. Victoria's voice hardened with certainty. He'll try to use her against me, just like he used Alexander. The phone kept ringing, its screen glowing like a warning beacon. Victoria stared at it, 20 years of pain and determination crystallizing into this moment. Let him come, she said softly. This time I'm ready for him. Chapter 5. Ghosts of Yesterday. The Sterling Records facility occupied an entire floor of a nondescript building in Queens, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan. As Alexander and Catherine walked through rows of filing cabinets and storage boxes, their footsteps echoed in the dusty silence. This was where the empire kept its secrets, decades of deals, contracts, and documents that told the true story of the Sterling legacy. The Foundation records should be in Section F, Alexander said, consulting a directory. His tie was loosened, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. They'd been searching for hours. Catherine ran her fingers along the labels, her mind racing. Dad, there's something I don't understand. If Mum discovered illegal activities, why didn't she go to the authorities? Alexander paused, memories flooding back. Your mother. She was different from us, Catherine. She believed in justice, in doing what was right, no matter the cost. But in our world, he gestured to the surrounding files, evidence can disappear. Witnesses can be discredited. Your grandfather taught me that power wasn't just about money, it was about controlling the truth itself. And you believed him, even when it came to Mum? The question hit him like a physical blow. I believed what I was trained to believe. When your grandfather showed me the psychiatric reports, the doctor's statements about your mother's paranoid delusions, his voice cracked. I failed her, Catherine. I chose the family legacy over the truth. They reached a locked cabinet marked Sterling Foundation, Executive Records. Alexander inserted a key, but Catherine put her hand over his. Before we open this, she said quietly, I need to know something. All those years, all those society events and charity galas, was any of it real, or was it all just part of the act? Alexander met his daughter's gaze, seeing not just Victoria's features but her unflinching demand for truth. The business, The social standing, that was the act. But you, Catherine, you were the only real thing in my life. Everything I did, I thought I was protecting you. By lying to me? By making me believe my mother was dead? By keeping you safe from the truth. The words exploded from him. You don't know what your grandfather is capable of, what he's done to protect this empire. The lights suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lights flickered, on casting eerie shadows through the rows of cabinets. Dad? Catherine's voice wavered. Stay close, Alexander ordered, pulling out his phone. No signal. We need to... A noise from the far end of the room made them both freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing off the walls. Well, well, a familiar voice emerged from the shadows. I always knew sentimentality would be your downfall, Alexander. Catherine grabbed her father's arm. Dad, who... Hello, Richard, Alexander said coldly as a figure stepped into the dim light. I thought you were living comfortably in Switzerland. Richard Sterling looked exactly as Catherine remembered from childhood. Tall, imposing, with steel grey hair and eyes that could freeze blood. But there was something else now, something predatory in his stance. Did you really think I wouldn't be watching? Richard's voice dripped with contempt. That I wouldn't know the moment Victoria resurfaced, that I wouldn't see you running to... Dig up the past. You destroyed her life, Alexander growled. You made me believe my wife was dead. I protected this family, Richard roared. Everything I built, everything I sacrificed, it was all for the legacy. And now you're going to throw it away because your wife turned up playing homeless? Catherine stepped forward, despite Alexander's attempt to hold her back. Playing homeless? She lived on the streets for 20 years because of you. Richard's laugh was cold. Is that what you think? That your mother spent 20 years eating from garbage cans? He pulled out his phone, showing them a series of photographs. Victoria in business attire, entering luxury buildings, meeting with powerful people. She's been planning this for years, building her own empire in the shadows. And now she's using you both to destroy everything we built. Alexander stared at the photos, his world tilting again. What are you saying? I'm saying your wife isn't. The victim here, son, she's the architect. Ask yourself, why now? Why show herself to Catherine on that street? Why let you see her? Richard's eyes glittered. Because she knew you'd do exactly this. Start digging, start questioning, start pulling threads that would make everything unravel. No, Catherine shook her head. You're lying. You're trying to manipulate us just like you always have. Am I? Richard stepped closer. Then let me tell you something about your mother that even Alexander doesn't know. Something that will make you understand why I had to act 20 years ago. He turned to Alexander. Do you want to know the real reason Victoria was investigating the Foundation? Why she was so desperate to destroy our family? Alexander felt ice spread through his veins. Don't. Tell me, Catherine demanded. Richard's smile was triumphant. Because Catherine isn't your daughter, Alexander. Victoria was pregnant when she married you. She used you, used our name, our power, and when I discovered the truth, the emergency, lights went out completely, plunging them into total darkness. When they flickered back on seconds later, Richard was gone. But his voice echoed through the facility's speakers. You have 24 hours to stop this investigation, or I release everything I have on both of you. And believe me, the truth about Catherine's paternity is just the beginning. Chapter 6. Truth and Consequences. The ride back to Manhattan was silent, the revelation hanging between Alexander and Catherine like a wall of ice. The city lights blurred past the car windows, but Catherine saw nothing, her grandfather's words echoing. In her mind, Catherine isn't your daughter. In the Sterling Tower penthouse, Alexander poured himself a drink with shaking hands. Catherine stood by the windows, arms wrapped around herself, looking out at the empire that suddenly felt like a prison. Is it true? She finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alexander set down his glass. I don't know. He laughed bitterly. There's so much I don't know anymore. Everything I thought was certain. All these years, Catherine turned to face him, you've controlled every aspect of my life. Where I went to school, who I could be friends with, what I could do with my future. Was that because you were trying to mold me into a proper Sterling? Or because deep down you knew I wasn't one? Catherine, please, no! She slammed her hand against the window. I deserve the truth. About Mom, about you, about who I really am. Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from an encrypted number contained a video link. With trembling fingers, he pressed play. The footage was grainy, dated 20 years ago. It showed Victoria in Richard Sterling's office, her face flushed with anger. You can't bury this, Richard. Victoria's voice crackled through the speaker. I have copies of everything, the bribes, the laundered money, the threats. I'm not going to let you destroy more lives. Richard's voice was calm, deadly. Think about Catherine, about her future. The Sterling name can give her everything. The he. Sterling name? Victoria laughed. You mean the name you've built on corruption and fear? I won't let you do to her what you did to Alexander. You turned your own son into a puppet, made him believe that power matters more than truth, more than love. Because love is weakness. Richard's fist crashed down. Look what it's done to you. Pregnant, desperate, marrying into our family, to give your child a future, and now you want to destroy that future with your misguided morality. The video cut off abruptly. Another message appeared. The full recording goes to the FBI in 24 hours, along with everything else. V. Catherine sank into a chair, her legs giving way. She kept evidence. All these years. She was protecting you. Alexander's voice was hollow. From me. From what I'd become. Mr. Sterling? Margaret's voice came through the intercom. There's something you need to see. The TV mounted on the office wall came to life, showing a breaking news report. The headline made Alexander's blood run cold. Sterling Empire linked to global financial scandal, whistleblower, reveals decades of corruption. The reporter's voice filled the room. In a shocking development, evidence has emerged, linking the Sterling family to one of the largest financial fraud schemes in history. Documents provided by an anonymous source show that the Sterling Foundation, a supposedly charitable organization, was used to launder billions of dollars for political and business leaders around the world. Catherine watched the empire crumbling in real time, stock prices plummeting, reporters swarming the building's entrance. But all she could think about was her mother, living on the streets, gathering evidence, waiting for this moment. She didn't just survive, Catherine whispered. She fought back. All this time she was fighting for me. Alexander stood frozen, watching his life's work dissolve. But strangely, he felt something else beneath the shock, relief. The weight of lies and pretense of being Richard Sterling's perfect son began to lift. His phone buzzed again. Another message, this time with an address in Brooklyn. Come alone, it's time we talked, Kiksu, Victoria. Catherine saw the message over his shoulder. I'm coming with you. Catherine, it's not safe. Your grandfather is the real enemy, not Mom. Catherine's eyes flashed with determination. You spent 20 years believing his lies. I spent 20 years thinking my mother was dead. We both deserve to hear the truth from her. Alexander looked at his daughter. Possibly not. His daughter by blood, but his in every way that mattered, and saw the strength he'd always admired in Victoria, the strength he'd lost somewhere along the way. All right, he said quietly. Let's go find your mother. As they left the office, the empire Richard Sterling had built on lies continued to crumble on every screen, every headline, every breaking news alert. But for the first time in 20 years, Alexander felt truly free. The truth, no matter how painful, was finally coming to light. Chapter 7. Reunions and Revelations. The Brooklyn address led them to a sleek high-rise overlooking the East River. As Alexander and Catherine stepped into the penthouse office suite, they found themselves in a space that rivaled Sterling Tower in luxury and power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Manhattan's skyline, the very empire that was now crumbling across the river. Maxwell Chen Investment Group, Catherine read the elegant logo on the wall. Mom built this. She had help. Marcus Chen emerged from a side office, his expression guarded. "Victoria has been expecting you." Alexander studied the man before him, noting his expensive suit and confident bearing. "You're the one who helped her, all these years." "I gave her a chance," Marcus corrected. "Victoria did the rest herself. 20 years of strategic planning, building connections, gathering evidence, all while your father thought she was broken and helpless." Before Alexander could respond, a door opened. Victoria stepped out and Catherine's breath caught. Gone was the homeless woman from the street. Instead, her mother stood before her in an elegant black suit, her silver-streaked hair framing a face that showed both strength and vulnerability. "Catherine," Victoria breathed, her composure cracking. "My beautiful girl." Catherine moved forward as if in a dream, but stopped short of embracing her mother. "Why?" Her voice trembled. "Why did you let me believe you were dead? Why did you live on the streets when you had?" "All this. Because I needed to be invisible," Victoria answered softly. "Richard Sterling had eyes everywhere. If he knew I was building a new life, gathering evidence." She gestured to the street scene below. "The homeless are truly invisible in this city. I could move freely, observe, collect information. The woman you saw on the street, that wasn't an act. That was one of many lives I've lived these past 20 years. And now?" Alexander's voice was hoarse. "Was it all worth it? Destroying?" "Everything, including Catherine's trust in her family." Victoria's eyes hardened. "Family? You mean the lies Richard built? The empire of corruption he created?" She moved to her desk, pressing a button that activated screens along the wall. Documents, photographs, and videos appeared. 2 decades of evidence meticulously gathered. "Your father didn't just launder money through the foundation, Alexander. He destroyed lives. Anyone who threatened to expose him was discredited, ruined, or worse. When I discovered the truth, when I tried to stop him..." She pulled up the psychiatric reports. "He had me declared insane, locked away, drugged until I could barely remember my own name." Catherine moved closer to the screens, reading the documents with growing horror. These people, all of them were victims? Journalists who got too close to the truth, whistleblowers who tried to expose the corruption, competitors who wouldn't play by Richard's rules. Victoria's voice shook with controlled rage. "Your grandfather built his power by destroying others. And you, Alexander, you were his masterpiece, the perfect son, trained to put power above everything, even the truth about your own wife." Alexander staggered slightly, gripping the edge of a chair. "I believed him. When he showed me the evidence of your mental breakdown, the accusations you were making..." "God, Victoria, I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," Victoria said quietly. "Not anymore." She turned to Catherine. "Your grandfather was right about one thing. You're not Alexander's biological daughter." Catherine felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Alexander moved to support her, but she pulled away. "I was already pregnant when I met Alexander," Victoria continued. "Your real father was a journalist, investigating the Sterling Foundation. When he got too close to the truth, Richard had him eliminated. I was young, desperate, afraid for my baby's future. Alexander was kind, successful, seemingly independent from his father's influence. I thought I could protect you by giving you the Sterling name." "But Richard found out," Alexander whispered. Victoria nodded. "He discovered the truth just weeks before he had me committed. He said he would expose everything, destroy both our lives unless I disappeared. But he underestimated me. Even in that mental hospital, I was gathering evidence, making allies. Marcus helped me escape, helped me build this company. And now..." Chitawe pressed another button, and new documents appeared on the screens. Bank records, offshore accounts, evidence of crimes that went far beyond financial fraud. Richard Sterling isn't just corrupt, Catherine. He's a monster, and tomorrow, when the full extent of his crimes is revealed, the Sterling name won't mean power anymore. It will mean disgrace. Catherine looked between her mother and the man she'd always called father, seeing the weight of 20 years of lies and pain in both their faces. "What about me?" she asked softly. Was I just part of your revenge plan? Victoria's composure finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she moved toward her daughter. Everything I did, every moment of suffering, every piece of evidence, I gathered, it was all to protect you, to make sure Richard Sterling could never hurt you the way he hurt so many others. But as Victoria reached for her daughter, alarms suddenly blared throughout the building. Marcus rushed to a security monitor, his face paling. "Victoria," he said urgently, "we have a problem. Richard Sterling just entered the building, and he's not alone." Chapter 8. The Price of Power. Security cameras showed Richard Sterling striding through the lobby, flanked by 4 men in dark suits. His face was a mask of cold fury as he bypassed security, heading straight for the elevators. "He's using an override code," Marcus reported, fingers flying over his keyboard. "Someone inside the building is helping him." Victoria moved with practiced efficiency, activating security protocols on her computer. "Marcus, initiate Protocol Omega. Catherine, Alexander, you need to leave, now." "I'm not leaving you," Catherine protested. "Not again." "You don't understand," Victoria's voice was urgent. "Richard won't just try to stop the evidence from coming out. He'll destroy everything and everyone in his path. He always has." Alexander stepped forward, standing between his wife and the door. "Then we face him together. I've spent 20 years being his puppet. No more." The elevator's security override warning flashed on the screens. They were coming up fast. Victoria grabbed a USB drive from her desk, pressing it into Catherine's hands. "This contains everything, the complete evidence, account numbers, names, dates. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., it automatically uploads to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the country. Richard can't stop it, but he can still hurt us before then." "Mom, please." "Catherine, listen to me." Victoria gripped her daughter's shoulders. "You are the best thing I've ever done in this world. Everything else, the revenge, the evidence, this company, it doesn't matter. You matter. I won't let him hurt you." The elevator chimed. Marcus positioned himself by the door, hand inside his jacket. "Victoria, the secondary exit is clear. Take them and go. I'll hold them off." But Victoria stood her ground, moving to stand behind her desk. "No more running, no more hiding." She looked at Alexander. "Get Catherine out of here. Take the service elevator to the garage. There's a car waiting." Alexander hesitated, 20 years of regret and love and pain crystallizing in this moment. "Victoria, go!" she commanded, just as the office doors burst open. Richard Sterling entered first, his presence filling the room like a gathering storm. His eyes took in the scene, the evidence displayed on the screens, his son and granddaughter standing beside the woman he'd tried to destroy, and a cold smile curved his lips. "The prodigal family reunion," he said softly. "How touching." "It's over, Richard." Victoria's voice was steel. "In less than 12 hours, everyone will know what you really are." "Over?" Richard laughed, the sound chilling. "My dear Victoria, did you really think I wouldn't have contingency plans? That I wouldn't be prepared for your little revenge scheme?" He nodded to one of his men, who produced a tablet. "Would you like to see what real power looks like?" He turned the tablet toward them. On the screen, live security footage showed dozens of people, employees of Maxwell Chen Investment Group, being held in the building's lobby by armed security. "Your entire staff," Richard continued. "Loyal, employees who trusted you with their careers, their futures. One call from me, and they all face federal charges for conspiracy and fraud. Their lives ruined, just like you tried to ruin my family." Victoria's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "Using innocent people as leverage. You haven't changed at all. I've survived this long by understanding one simple truth," Richard moved closer, his shadow falling across Victoria's desk. "Everyone has a weakness, even you with your righteous crusade and your carefully gathered evidence. You forget, I've had 20 years to prepare too, to gather my own evidence, to place my own pieces on the board." He turned to Catherine, his expression softening with calculated warmth. "Did your mother tell you everything, dear? about your real father, about why she really married Alexander. Don't, Victoria warned. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Richard's voice dripped with mock sympathy. But you deserve to know. Your mother didn't just marry Alexander for protection. She married him because I arranged it. Because I knew who she really was, what she was hiding, the perfect way to keep her under control. Catherine looked between her mother and grandfather. Confusion and fear warring in her expression. What is he talking about? Tell her, Victoria, Richard commanded. Tell her who really orchestrated everything. Tell her about the deals you made, the people you used, including my son, to build your precious evidence. Tell her how many lives you destroyed in your quest for revenge. Victoria's hands clenched on her desk. Everything I did was to protect her from you. Protection? Richard scoffed. Is that what you call using your own daughter as bait? Arranging that street meeting, knowing I'd be watching, knowing it would draw Alexander in, make him question everything. He shook his head sadly. You're more like me than you want to admit, Victoria. We both understand that power requires sacrifice. The words hung in the air like poison, and for the first time, Catherine saw doubt flicker in her mother's eyes. Had it all been calculated? Every move, every revelation, every moment leading to this confrontation? But before anyone could speak, a new alarm blared through the building. Marcus's eyes widened at his security screens. Victoria, he said urgently. Federal agents just entered the lobby. They're heading up. Richard's smile widened. Ah, yes, right on schedule. You didn't think you were the only one who could manipulate law enforcement, did you? In about 30 seconds, this office will be swarming with agents, ready to arrest everyone in this room for conspiracy, fraud, and corporate espionage. He held up a hand displaying his own USB drive. My evidence against you is quite compelling. Every deal you made, every law you broke while building your revenge. The only question is, his eyes gleamed with triumph, who will they believe? The respected businessman trying to stop a criminal conspiracy? Or the woman who spent 20 years orchestrating an elaborate revenge plot? The elevator chimed again. Time had run out. Chapter 9. Checkmate. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway outside. Victoria's eyes darted between the ED doors and her family, calculations running behind her calm exterior. Richard's smug expression told her he thought he'd won, but 20 years of planning hadn't prepared her for just one contingency. Marcus, she said quietly. Protocol Phoenix. Marcus's fingers flew across his keyboard, and suddenly every screen in the office went dark. When they reactivated seconds later, they displayed a single message. Transmission complete. Richard's smile faltered. What did you do? Did you really think I'd wait until tomorrow? Victoria's voice carried a note of triumph. The evidence is already out there. Every major news outlet, every law enforcement agency, every financial regulator, they're all receiving it right now. Your empire isn't falling tomorrow, Richard. It's falling today. As if on cue, phones throughout the office began buzzing with news alerts. Catherine pulled out her phone, her eyes widening as she read, Breaking federal authorities launch global investigation into Sterling Enterprise criminal network. Multiple arrests underway. Impossible, Richard snarled, but his composure was cracking. He turned to his men. Lock down this office. No one leaves until federal agents. The command came from the hallway as the doors burst open. But instead of moving to arrest Victoria, the agents trained their weapons on Richard and his men. Richard Sterling, the lead agent announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. This is absurd, Richard backed away. I have evidence. He held up his USB drive. You mean this evidence? Another agent stepped forward, someone Victoria clearly recognized. The fabricated documents your team created to frame Victoria Maxwell. We've had copies of those for months, along with recordings of you ordering their creation. Understanding dawned on Richard's face as he looked at the agent. You've been working with her. For the past year, the agent confirmed. Mrs. Maxwell has been a confidential informant in our investigation into Sterling Enterprises. Everything she's gathered has been verified and authenticated by our forensics team. Victoria moved from behind her desk, her posture relaxed for the first time. Did you really think I'd risk everything on one dramatic confrontation, Richard? That I wouldn't have backup plans for my backup plans? She gestured to Marcus. Show him. Marcus activated another screen, displaying footage of multiple arrests taking place simultaneously across the globe. Richard's closest allies, his most trusted associates, all being taken into custody. Your entire network, Victoria explained. Every person who helped you destroy lives, every corrupt official who took your bribes, every executive who helped you launder money, they're all falling together. Catherine watched the scene unfold, her mind racing. The homeless woman act, the street meeting, it was all staged. The meeting was, Victoria admitted, but the years on the street weren't. I needed to understand what it meant to lose everything, to be truly invisible. Each identity I created, each life I lived, they all taught me something about survival. She turned to Alexander. About what really matters. Alexander had been silent throughout the confrontation, but now he stepped forward. The Foundation records we were searching for in the archive were copies, Victoria finished. I needed you to go there, to start asking questions, to see for yourself what your father had built. Her expression softened. I couldn't just tell you the truth, Alexander. You had to discover it yourself. You manipulated us, Catherine's voice shook, just like he did. No, Victoria moved toward her daughter. Everything I told you about why I disappeared, about protecting you, that was all true. The staging, the timing, the evidence, that was about justice, about making sure Richard couldn't hurt anyone else. As the agents began leading Richard and his men away, the old man's composure finally shattered. You think this is over? He snarled. You think destroying my empire makes you righteous? You're just like me, Victoria. Everything you've done, the lies, the manipulation, using your own family as pawns, it's exactly what I would have done. Victoria met his gaze steadily. You're right about one thing, Richard. I learned from the best, but there's one crucial difference between us. She took Catherine's hand. I never forgot what I was fighting for. Richard's face contorted with rage as he was led away, but his final words hung in the air. Ask her about Paris, Catherine. Ask her what really happened to your father. The door closed behind them, leaving the family in sudden silence. The USO screens continued to display the aftermath of Richard's fall, stock prices plummeting, news headlines multiplying, a dynasty crumbling in real time. Catherine pulled her hand from Victoria's grasp. What did he mean about Paris? Victoria's victory faded from her expression, replaced by something darker, more vulnerable. Catherine. No more strategies, Catherine demanded. No more calculated revelations. I want the truth. All of it. Victoria sank into a chair, the weight of decades settling on her shoulders. Your father, he wasn't just investigating the Sterling Foundation. He was investigating something much bigger, much more dangerous, something that even Richard didn't fully control. Alexander moved closer, his own questions burning. What was in Paris, Victoria? She looked up at them both, tears finally breaking through her careful composure. The beginning of everything, and the reason why this isn't over. Richard wasn't the only one pulling strings all these years. He was just a piece in a much larger game. Outside the windows, dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. But in the office, shadows still lingered, holding secrets yet to be revealed. Chapter Side 10, Shadows of Paris. The federal agents had cleared out, taking with them the last vestiges of Richard Sterling's presence. In Victoria's office, Marcus quietly coordinated with security teams, while Victoria, Alexander, and Catherine moved to a more private conference room. The city spread out below them, unknowingly witnessing the fall of one of its most powerful dynasties. Paris, Victoria began, her fingers tracing patterns on the polished table, was where I met your father, Catherine. James Crawford was an... investigative journalist working on what he thought was a story about corporate corruption. But he found something much bigger, a network of powerful people who controlled more than just money. She stood, moving to a hidden panel in the wall. Behind it was a safe which she opened with practiced ease. 25 years ago, James uncovered evidence of a group called the Consortium. Business leaders, politicians, judges, people who shaped the world from the shadows. The Sterling Foundation was just one piece of their operation. From the safe, she withdrew a worn leather journal. This was your father's. He documented everything he discovered, every connection, every secret. She handled the book with reverence. When he got too close to the truth, they came after him. Richard Sterling wasn't responsible for what happened in Paris. He was just following orders from the Consortium. Catherine took the journal with trembling hands. What happened to him? Victoria's voice caught. We were supposed to meet at a cafe near the Louvre. James had arranged to get us both out of the country. He knew they were closing in, but he never arrived. She closed her eyes, the memory still fresh after all these years. 3 days later, his body was found in the Seine. The French police ruled it an accident, but you were already pregnant, Alexander said softly. Yes, and terrified. I knew they would come for me next, would do anything to keep James's investigation buried. That's when Richard Sterling approached me. A bitter smile crossed her face. He offered protection, a new identity, a future for my unborn child. All I had to do was marry his son. Alexander stood abruptly. He knew. All along, he knew. He saw an opportunity, Victoria explained. A way to keep James's evidence contained while adding another layer of control over his own son. What he didn't know was that I had already copied everything from James's investigation. While Richard thought he was controlling me, I was learning about his connections to the Consortium, gathering new evidence, building my own network. Catherine opened the journal, scanning the pages of meticulous notes. The story about you discovering the Foundation's illegal activities, that wasn't the real reason Richard had you committed. The Foundation was just the surface. I used my position as Alexander's wife to dig deeper, to trace the connections James had uncovered. When Richard realized what I was doing, when he found out I had evidence that could expose not just him, but the entire Consortium, Victoria's hands clenched. The psychiatric hospital wasn't just about silencing me. It was a message from the Consortium, a warning about what happens to people who threaten their power. Alexander paced the room, decades of manipulation becoming clear. My whole life, every major decision, my marriage, my business deals, even how I raised Catherine, it was all orchestrated by them. Your father was their perfect servant, Victoria said. He followed their orders, protected their interests, and molded you to do the same. But he got careless, arrogant. He started building his own power base, thinking he could outmaneuver them. And now? Catherine looked up from the journal. With Richard arrested, his empire falling, what will they do? Victoria's expression hardened. They'll try to contain the damage. Richard's arrest, the evidence I released, it only exposes part of their network. They'll sacrifice him and his allies to protect the bigger picture. Unless we expose everything, Catherine said, a familiar determination, her father's. Determination, showing in her eyes. Catherine, these people, they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens them, just like they did to James. I don't care. Catherine stood, her voice steady. They've controlled our lives, destroyed families, corrupted everything they touched. Someone has to stop them. Alexander moved to his daughter's side. She's right. We've spent too long being their puppets. Victoria looked between them. The husband whose love she'd buried beneath years of calculated revenge, and the daughter she'd sacrificed everything to protect. It won't be like taking down Richard. The Consortium operates in shadows. They're patient, ruthless, and they have influence everywhere. But they've never faced anyone like us, Catherine said, a family with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Through the windows, the morning sun cast long shadows across the city. Somewhere in those shadows, the members of the Consortium were undoubtedly already moving to protect themselves, to eliminate loose ends, to maintain their control. But as Victoria watched her daughter reading James's journal, saw the same passion for truth that had driven him, she made her decision. She'd spent 20 years orchestrating Richard Sterling's downfall. Now it was time for a bigger battle. "There's something else you need to see," she said, returning to the safe. "Something James discovered in Paris that even the consortium doesn't know I have. The real reason they had to silence him." She withdrew, a small locked box, its contents about to change everything once again. Chapter 11. The Key to Everything. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she placed the locked box on the conference room table. It was smaller than a shoebox, made of brushed steel with no visible keyhole or latch. Catherine and Alexander leaned forward, watching as Victoria pressed her thumb against what appeared to be a random spot on its surface. A soft click, then a whir of hidden mechanisms. The box opened to reveal a single USB drive and a stack of photographs. "Before James disappeared in Paris," Victoria began, "he managed to hide these in a security deposit box. The key was coded in his journal, something only I would understand." She spread the photographs across the table. "This is what he discovered. This is why they silenced him." The photos showed various meetings in elegant European settings, private clubs, luxury hotels, secluded estates. In each image, some of the world's most powerful figures were caught in unguarded moments, making deals that should never have existed. "The consortium isn't just about money or power," Victoria explained. "They're about controlling the future itself. These meetings were about choosing which governments would rise or fall, which technologies would succeed or fail, which social movements would flourish or be crushed." Catherine picked up one photo, studying it intently. "This man, isn't he the current president of the World Bank?" "Look at the date on the photo," Victoria said quietly. "It was taken 5 years before he was appointed. In that meeting, they were deciding not just his position, but the next decade of global financial policy." Alexander examined another image. "I recognize some of these people. They've been to Sterling Foundation events." "Your father was their public face in New York," Victoria confirmed. "The legitimate businessman who could move in social circles, influence politics, and handle their financial operations. But he was never really one of them. They saw him as a useful tool, nothing more." She picked up the USB drive. "But the photos aren't the most dangerous thing James discovered. This drive contains details of something called Project Oracle, an artificial intelligence system the consortium was developing 25 years ago. It was designed to predict and influence global events, to give them almost total control over the world's financial and political systems." Marcus, who had been quietly monitoring security feeds, looked up sharply. "An AI system in the late 90s. "They were decades ahead of anything publicly known," Victoria said. "James found evidence that they'd recruited or coerced the world's top scientists in secret. But something went wrong. The system started making predictions they didn't expect, revealing patterns they couldn't control." "What kind of predictions?" Catherine asked. Victoria's expression darkened. According to James's notes, Project Oracle predicted its own exposure. It showed them exactly how their network would eventually be discovered and destroyed. And it all started with a journalist in Paris. The implications hung heavy in the air. James hadn't been killed just for what he'd discovered, but for what the consortium's own system had predicted he would do. That's why they went after him so aggressively, Alexander realized. Why they were willing to risk exposure by having him eliminated. "Yes," Victoria's voice was barely a whisper, "but they didn't know about me, about the evidence I had, or about Catherine." She touched her daughter's hand. "Project Oracle predicted a sequence of events that would lead to the consortium's downfall. James's investigation was just the first step. Everything that's happened since, Richard's arrest, the exposure of the Sterling Foundation, even this moment right now, it's all part of what the system foresaw." Catherine's eyes widened. "You mean we're following a path that was predicted 25 years ago?" "Not following," Victoria corrected. "Choosing. The system didn't just predict one future, it showed multiple possibilities. The consortium saw a future where they maintained control, where James's death secured their power. But he saw something else in the data, something that gave him hope. She squeezed Catherine's hand. He saw you. Before Catherine could respond, Marcus's voice cut through the moment. Victoria, we have a problem. The building's security system just detected multiple unauthorized access attempts. Someone's trying to breach our defenses. Victoria moved swiftly to the windows, scanning the street below. Black SUVs were pulling up to the building's entrance. Men in suits were deploying with practiced efficiency. They're here, she said grimly. The consortium's cleanup team. They're not just after the evidence anymore. They're here to eliminate any trace of Project Oracle. How did they find? Just so quickly, Alexander demanded. Because they've been watching all along, Victoria realized. Richard's arrest, the release of the sterling evidence, they let it happen. They wanted us to feel safe, to bring everything into the open. She turned to her family, fear and determination warring in her expression. We played right into their hands. Marcus's fingers flew over his keyboard. They've disabled the main elevators. Security reports armed intruders in the stairwells. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach this floor. Catherine clutched her father's journal tighter. What do we do? Victoria gathered the photos and USB drive, returning them to the steel box. We get you out of here. There's a private elevator, hidden behind the office walls. Marcus and I installed it when we built this place, a contingency the consortium doesn't know about. You're coming with us, Catherine insisted, but Victoria's expression was resolute. Someone has to stay behind, buy you time to escape. Marcus will get you to safety, to people who can protect you. No, Alexander stepped forward. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. Not again. This isn't like before, Victoria's voice cracked. Project Oracle showed multiple futures, multiple paths. But in every scenario where the consortium falls, there's a constant. Catherine survives. She carries the truth forward. She pressed the steel box into her daughter's hands. You're the key, sweetheart. You always have been. The sound of gunfire erupted from the stairwell. They were out of time. Chapter 12. Choices and Consequences. The gunfire was getting closer. Marcus rushed to a seemingly solid wall, pressing his hand against a hidden panel. A section of the wall slid silently open, revealing a sleek private elevator. This will take you to a secure garage level, he explained quickly. There's a car waiting, programmed with coordinates for a safe house. Everything you need, new identities, resources, contacts, it's all there. Victoria moved to her desk, activating a series of commands on her computer. I'm initiating Protocol Omega Black. In 60 seconds, every system in this building will go into lockdown. It won't stop them, but it'll slow them down. Mom, please, Catherine begged. Come with us. Listen to me carefully, Victoria gripped her daughter's shoulders. In your father's journal, there's a code. Numbers that look like dates, but they're coordinates. Places where he hid copies of his evidence, including more Project Oracle data. Find them. Find the people he trusted. They're still out there, still fighting the consortium in their own ways. Alexander tried to pull Victoria toward the elevator. There has to be another way. There isn't. She pressed a key into his hand. This opens a storage unit in Geneva. Everything I've gathered over 20 years, every name, every connection, every secret the consortium wanted buried. Use it wisely. Her voice softened. Protect our daughter, Alexander. Be the father I always knew you could be. The building's lights flickered as Protocol Omega Black engaged. Emergency shutters began descending over the windows. They're on this floor, Marcus warned, checking his security feeds one last time before the systems went dark. Victoria grabbed Catherine's face between her hands. You are so much like your father. His courage, his determination to expose the truth, it lives in you. But you have something he didn't. People who can protect you, guide you. She kissed her daughter's forehead. I love you more than anything in this world. Everything I've done, the lies, the manipulation, even leaving you, it was all to give you a chance to finish what James started. The sound of explosions rocked the building, the consortium's team breaching the security doors. Go! Victoria pushed them toward the Elevator. "Marcus, get them out of here." But Catherine pulled away from Marcus's grip, determination blazing in her eyes. "No, I won't let you do this alone." "Catherine, you said Project Oracle showed multiple futures." Catherine's voice was steady. "Then let's change the one you saw together." Alexander stepped out of the elevator, standing beside his daughter. "She's right. We've spent 20 years being torn apart by secrets and lies. No more running, no more sacrifices." Victoria stared at them, seeing not the privileged family she'd left behind, but warriors ready to face whatever came through those doors. "Marcus!" He was already sealing the elevator, drawing his weapon. "4 entrances to secure if we coordinate our defenses." The main doors exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris, dark figures advanced with military precision. But they stopped short at the sight before them. A family united, standing their ground, protecting something far more precious than evidence or secrets. Victoria felt a strange calm settle over her. For 20 years she'd lived in shadows, plotting revenge, sacrificing everything for justice. But looking at her daughter's fierce determination, at Alexander's unwavering support, she realized that maybe Project Oracle had shown her the wrong future. Maybe the path to bringing down the consortium wasn't through careful plans and calculated sacrifices, but through the one thing they could never understand, the strength of a family fighting together. She reached for Catherine's hand, feeling Alexander's strong presence at her back, knowing Marcus stood ready at their side. The consortium's team advanced, weapons raised, but Victoria smiled. They had no idea what they were really facing. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "we face it as a family." The world seemed to hold its breath as 2 forces clashed. The consortium's power against a family's love, shadows against truth, control against freedom. And in that moment, the future itself hung in the balance, waiting to see which path would finally be chosen. Chapter 13. Standing Ground. The first wave of consortium operatives moved with lethal precision, but Victoria's office had been designed for exactly this scenario. As they advanced, hidden security measures activated. Reinforced barriers dropped from the ceiling, splitting the attackers into smaller groups. Smart glass windows instantly turned opaque, eliminating sniper positions from neighboring buildings. "Catherine, Alexander, stay behind the tactical furniture," Marcus commanded, his training evident in every move. "Everything in this office is bulletproof." Victoria was already at her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Initiating Protocol Sentinel. Marcus, West Corridor." A hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing an arsenal of non-lethal defensive weapons. Marcus grabbed what looked like a high-tech riot shield, tossing similar equipment to Alexander. "Dad, the journal," Catherine suddenly exclaimed, flipping through James's pages. "These aren't just coordinates, they're security protocols." "Look," she pointed to a series of numbers disguised as dates. "Mom, these match your building systems." Victoria's eyes widened. "James, he designed security systems before becoming a journalist. He must have..." She quickly input the sequences Catherine read out. The office's lighting shifted to a deep blue. Hidden vents released a colorless gas that made the attacking operatives stumble, their movements becoming sluggish. "Non-toxic paralytic compound," Marcus explained, securing the west entrance. "Their masks won't filter it completely." But the consortium's team was adapting quickly. They produced specialized equipment, countering the building's defenses with practiced efficiency. Their leader, a tall woman with silver hair and cold eyes, stepped forward. "Mrs. Sterling," she called out, her voice carrying authority. "Or do you prefer Maxwell now? I'm Diana Voss, Chief of Special Operations for the Consortium. You have something that belongs to us." "The only thing I have is the truth," Victoria responded, positioning herself between the attackers and her family. "Truth?" Diana smiled without warmth. "Like the truth about what really happened in Paris, about the choices you made after James died." Her eyes fixed on Catherine. "Your daughter deserves to know everything, doesn't she?" "Catherine," gripped her father's journal tighter. Whatever you're implying, your mother is quite the strategist, Diana continued. She didn't just hide from us all these years. She made deals, sacrificed others to maintain her cover. Ask her about Dr. Chen, Marcus's father, about how he helped develop Project Oracle, and what happened when he tried to shut it down. Marcus's stance faltered slightly. Victoria's face paled. Marcus, Diana's voice carried false sympathy. Did she tell you it was the consortium that eliminated your father? That's what you believed, isn't it? Why you helped her all these years? Don't listen to her, Victoria said sharply. She's trying to divide us. Am I? Diana produced a tablet, displaying documents. Your mother knew the truth, Marcus. She knew it was Richard Sterling who ordered your father's elimination. But she needed you, needed your resources and skills, so she let you believe it was us, channeled your revenge toward the consortium instead of the Sterlings. Marcus's hand tightened on his weapon. Victoria? It's not that simple. Victoria's voice shook. Everything I did was for the greater good, Diana finished. That's what we believe too. Project Oracle showed us that humanity needs guidance control. Without it, chaos reigns. Your husband understood that, didn't you, Alexander? The need for order, for strength? Alexander stood straighter. I understood fear. The way it can make you accept control, mistake it for safety. But I'm not afraid anymore. You should be. Diana's smile faded. Project Oracle didn't just predict futures, it shaped them. Everything that's happened, every choice you think you've made freely, was calculated decades ago. Your marriage, Catherine's birth, even this confrontation, you're all playing roles in a script written by an AI system 25 years ago. No, Catherine stepped forward. My father discovered something else in Project Oracle's predictions. Didn't he? Something that frightened the consortium enough to have him killed. Diana's expression flickered. Your father was an idealist who didn't understand the responsibility of power. He understood that free will matters more than control, Victoria said. That's what Project Oracle really predicted, that humanity's choices, our capacity for love and courage and redemption, would always overcome attempts to control us. Pretty words. Diana raised her hand, signaling her team. But let's test that theory. You have 30 seconds to surrender the Project Oracle data, or we eliminate everyone in this room. Your choice, Victoria. Risk everything for your principles, or save your family. The consortium operatives raised their weapons. Marcus looked between Victoria and the evidence about his father, years of trust hanging by a thread. Alexander moved closer to Catherine, protecting his daughter while processing revelations about his own manipulated life. Victoria faced Diana, 20 years of fighting distilling to this moment. The future Project Oracle had predicted was unfolding, but suddenly she understood what James had seen all those years ago. It wasn't about the specific choices. It was about having the courage to make them freely. She looked at her family, seeing not pawns in a grand scheme, but people who had chosen to stand with her despite everything. And in that moment, she made her own choice. You're right about one thing, Victoria said quietly. This was all predicted, but not by Project Oracle. She smiled, and for the first time, Diana looked uncertain. By a father who believed in his daughter's future more than he feared your power. Victoria's hand moved toward the computer, and everything changed. Chapter 14. Turning Points. Victoria's fingers danced across the keyboard, executing a command that made every screen in the office flare to life. But instead of security protocols or defensive measures, they displayed a video feed. James Crawford's face filled the screens, 25 years younger, but bearing the same determined expression Catherine had inherited. If you're seeing this, James's recorded image spoke, it means Victoria found the true purpose of Project Oracle. And more importantly, it means our daughter is ready to understand. Diana's composed facade cracked. Shut it down. But the video continued, broadcasting simultaneously across every device connected to the building's network. Project Oracle wasn't just a prediction system, James explained. It was a mirror showing humanity's potential for both control and freedom. The consortium saw it as a tool for power, but I saw something else. Proof that the human spirit can't be contained, that every attempt to control the future creates its own resistance. Catherine stepped closer to the screens, seeing her father's face for the first time. The coordinates in the journal aren't just locations, Victoria finished. They're nodes in a hidden network James created. Every person who ever resisted, the consortium, every piece of evidence ever gathered. It's all connected, waiting to be activated. Diana's team scrambled to counter the broadcast, but their equipment sparked and failed. What have you done? I haven't done anything, Victoria said calmly. 25 years ago, James programmed a virus into Project Oracle itself, not to destroy it, but to reveal its true purpose. All this time, while you thought you were using the system to control the future, it was actually documenting your crimes. Marcus lowered his weapon, understanding dawning. The security systems, the protocols, they weren't just for defense. They were collecting data, adding to James's network. My father knew they would come for him in Paris, Catherine realized, her voice thick with emotion. He sacrificed himself to set all this in motion. Alexander moved to Victoria's side, finally seeing the full scope of her mission. Everything you did, the years in hiding, building this company, even letting Marcus believe the consortium, killed his father. It was all to protect James's network until Catherine was ready. Ready for what? Diana demanded, but the tremor in her voice suggested she already knew. Catherine opened her father's journal to the last page, where a single line of code was hidden within a personal message. For my daughter, the key to a free future. Victoria smiled at Catherine. Project Oracle's final prediction wasn't about control or resistance. It was about choice. A choice that only someone born outside the consortium's influence, someone who understood both justice and power could make. The choice is yours, Catherine. James's recording continued. The network contains everything, the consortium's crimes, their members' identities, the true history of Project Oracle. You can expose it all with a single command. But be warned, the truth will change everything, not just for them, but for everyone who's been touched by their power. Diana's cold composure shattered completely. You can't. The system maintains order, prevents chaos. Without it, people make their own choices, Catherine interrupted. Face their own consequences. She looked at Victoria. That's what you've been preparing me for, isn't it? Not just to expose the truth, but to help build whatever comes after. Victoria touched her daughter's face gently. You have your father's heart and his courage, but the strength to make this choice, that's all yours. Marcus stepped forward, years of suspicion and revenge falling away as he finally understood his role in a larger fight. Whatever you decide, we stand with you. Alexander took Catherine's hand. Your mother risked everything to give you this choice. I spent my life avoiding difficult choices. Now it's time to make one that matters. Diana raised her weapon. This is your last warning. The consortium cannot be exposed. The consequences are exactly what Project Oracle predicted. Victoria cut in. Not chaos, but transformation, not destruction, but renewal. She turned to Catherine. Your father believed that humanity deserves the chance to shape its own future. Do you? Catherine looked around the room, at the armed operatives whose certainty was wavering, at Marcus, whose quest for revenge had become a fight for justice, at Alexander, who had found the courage to choose love over power, and at Victoria, who had sacrificed everything to give her this moment. She thought of James, the father she'd never known, who had seen this moment 25 years ago and believed in her ability to make the right choice. Not because Project Oracle predicted it, but because he had faith in humanity's capacity to choose freedom over control, truth over power, love over fear. Her fingers moved to the keyboard, entering the code that would change everything. I choose truth, she said softly, and pressed enter. Chapter 15. Chaos and Control. The moment Catherine pressed enter, the world began to change. Every screen in the office shifted, displaying a cascade of data being released across global networks. News organizations, law enforcement agencies, and financial regulators worldwide started receiving carefully curated packages of evidence, each designed to expose a different aspect of the consortium's control. Diana watched in horror as her communication devices erupted with urgent alerts. "What have you done?" she whispered, her composed facade crumbling completely. "Exactly what Project Oracle predicted," Victoria said, moving to stand beside her daughter. "The system didn't just see the future, it created a path to freedom." James understood that the only way to break the consortium's control was to let people see the truth for themselves. The office's screens showed news broadcasts beginning to pick up the story. Headlines flashed across multiple networks. Global conspiracy exposed, shadow organizations' control revealed, decades of manipulation uncovered. But Diana wasn't finished. Her hand tightened on her weapon. "You think exposing us ends this? The consortium has contingency plans for everything. Our influence runs deeper than you can imagine." "You mean like this?" Catherine pulled up another set of files on the screens. Emergency protocols to crash financial markets, orders to activate sleeper agents in governments worldwide, commands to release compromising information about anyone who opposes you. She smiled grimly. "My father didn't just document your crimes. He created countermeasures for every contingency." Alexander studied the data flowing across the screens with growing understanding. The Sterling Foundation's network, the connections I spent years building, they weren't just for Richard's benefit, were they? They were part of James's plan too. Victoria nodded. Every corrupt deal, every compromised official, they all led back to the consortium. By exposing everything at once, we've given them no place to hide, no one left to manipulate. Marcus's security monitors showed chaos erupting outside the building. Police vehicles were arriving, responding to automated alerts triggered by Catherine's command. Federal agents who weren't compromised by the consortium were already moving to secure evidence and arrest identified members. "Victoria," Marcus called out urgently, "multiple helicopters approaching, military grade." "The consortium's elite response team," Diana said, a hint of triumph returning to her voice. "They'll burn this building to the ground if necessary. Nothing can remain of Project Oracle." But Catherine was already ahead of them. "Mom, the failsafe Dad built into the system, it's not just about exposing truth, is it? It's about protecting it." Victoria smiled proudly. James knew they would try to destroy the evidence. That's why he didn't just hide it. He made it impossible to erase. The data Catherine just released, it's being copied and verified by thousands of independent systems worldwide. Journalists, activists, ethical hackers, everyone who's ever fought against corruption is receiving their own piece of the puzzle. Diana's team's communications crackled with desperate orders from consortium leadership. "Contain the situation. Eliminate all witnesses. Initiate Protocol Omega." "It's over, Diana," Alexander said quietly. "The more you try to control this, the more evidence you create of your own crimes." But Diana's expression had shifted from desperation to something more dangerous. Acceptance. "If we fall, we're taking you with us." She raised her hand, revealing the detonator. "The building is rigged with enough explosives to ensure nothing survives. Not you, not the evidence, not Project Oracle's predictions. You really don't understand, do you?" Catherine's voice was almost pitying. "This was never about surviving. It's about choosing truth over fear." She turned to the screens, where James's final message was playing. "To those who believe control is necessary for order, who think humanity can't be trusted with its own destiny. You've already lost, not because of Project Oracle's predictions, but because of the human spirit's endless capacity for courage and hope." Victoria reached for Catherine's hand as Diana's finger tightened on the detonator. "Your father would be so proud of you." Marcus moved to protect them, but Alexander was faster. In one fluid motion, he tackled Diana, wrestling for control of the detonator as her team raised their weapons. The office erupted into chaos. Marcus engaged the remaining operatives, his tactical training matching their military precision. Victoria pulled Catherine behind reinforced barriers as bullets flew. Screens shattered, but the data kept flowing, unstoppable now, spreading truth across the globe. Through the chaos, Catherine's voice rang out clear and determined. Project Oracle showed multiple futures, multiple choices, but it all came down to this moment, when humanity finally chooses truth over control, freedom over fear. The helicopters were getting closer, their rotors drowning out the sounds of battle. Diana struggled with Alexander, both of them fighting, for control of a device that could end everything. But in that moment of ultimate chaos, something unexpected happened, something not even Project Oracle had predicted. The truth began to change hearts. Chapter 16. Hearts and Minds. One by one, Diana's operatives began to lower their weapons, the truth flooding across their communication devices, evidence of how the consortium had manipulated them, used them, controlled them, was having an effect. They were soldiers, trained to follow orders, but they were also human beings capable of choosing their own path. "Stand down!" one of them called out, removing his tactical mask. "I didn't sign up for this." Diana, still struggling with Alexander, screamed in frustration. "You swore oaths. The consortium owns you." "No," another operative replied. "They manipulated us, just like they manipulated everyone else. But we can choose differently." The helicopters reached the building, hovering, outside the shattered windows. But instead of an assault team, a familiar face appeared. FBI assistant, Director Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister. "The building is surrounded," she announced through a megaphone. "Diana Voss, your entire network is exposed. The consortium's control centers worldwide are being raided as we speak. It's over." Diana finally broke free from Alexander, backing toward the windows with the detonator still in her hand. "You don't understand what you've done. Project Oracle didn't just predict the future, it managed it. Without the system's guidance, and without our control. The world will be free to choose its own path," Victoria finished. "That's what terrifies you, isn't it? Not chaos, but true freedom." Catherine stepped forward, still holding her father's journal. Project Oracle's final prediction wasn't about control or resistance. It was about this moment, when people would have to choose between living in fear or embracing truth. The screens around them showed the impact of James's failsafe spreading globally. Consortium members were being arrested on every continent. Hidden accounts were being frozen. Decades of carefully constructed control were unraveling in hours. "Your father was a fool," Diana spat at Catherine. "He thought exposing the truth would set people free. But humans need control. They need guidance. Without it, we learn to guide ourselves," Alexander said quietly. "I spent my life believing in the power of control, just like you. But looking at my daughter now, seeing her choose truth even in the face of danger, that's real strength." "Sarah," Chen's voice came through again. "Diana, your entire leadership structure is in custody. The Philippines, Switzerland, Dubai, every safe house and backup facility has been compromised. Surrender now." Diana looked at the detonator in her hand, then at the faces around her. Victoria's determination, Alexander's newfound courage, Marcus's quiet strength, and Catherine's unwavering hope. She saw not just individuals but representatives of the human spirit that Project Oracle had predicted would ultimately reject control. "You know what happens next?" she said softly. "The system predicted this too. Exposure, chaos, a world without guidance." "No," Catherine stepped closer, despite her mother's attempt to hold her back. "It predicted choice. Every person seeing the truth and deciding for themselves what to believe, how to act. That's not chaos. It's freedom." The detonator trembled in Diana's hand. "And if I choose to end it all right now, then you prove that the consortium never really believed in Project Oracle's predictions," Victoria said. "Because the system showed something you couldn't accept, that humanity's capacity for good is stronger than any attempt to control it." The morning sun broke through the clouds, streaming through the broken windows. In its light, they could see tears on Diana's face. "We thought we were protecting the world," she whispered. We thought control was necessary. Now you get to choose differently, Catherine said gently, just like everyone else. The detonator slipped from Diana's fingers, clattering to the floor. Marcus quickly secured it as FBI teams swarmed the office. Sarah Chen personally took Diana into custody, nodding respectfully to her brother as she led the consortium operative away. Catherine turned to the screens, where James's final message played one last time. To my daughter, the world. Your helping create won't be perfect. It won't be controlled or predictable, but it will be free, and that's worth fighting for. Victoria wrapped her arms around Catherine as Alexander joined them. Together they watched the sunrise over a changed world, a world where truth had finally overcome control, where love had proven stronger than fear, and where a family's courage had helped humanity choose its own future. Marcus approached them, holding a secure tablet. The global response is overwhelming. People everywhere are choosing to stand up, to reject manipulation, to embrace truth. Just like James predicted, Victoria said softly. Not because Project Oracle controlled the outcome, but because he believed in humanity's capacity to choose right when given the chance. The office was full of federal agents now, securing evidence and coordinating with teams worldwide. But in that moment, Catherine felt a deep sense of peace. The choice she'd made wasn't just about exposing truth. It was about believing in the future her father had seen, one where humanity would face its challenges with courage, hope, and free will. What happens now? Alexander asked, holding his family close. Catherine smiled, looking at the new day dawning over Manhattan. Now we do what Dad believed in. We help build a world based on truth instead of control, on love instead of fear. Together. Chapter 17. New Dawn. 3 days. After Catherine activated James's failsafe, the Maxwell Chen Investment Group headquarters had become the epicenter of a global transformation. The tactical teams were gone, replaced by investigators, journalists, and technology experts working to understand and verify the vast network of evidence James Crawford had built over 2 decades ago. Victoria's office, restored to order but forever changed, now served as a command center for what the media had dubbed the Great Awakening. Catherine sat at her mother's desk, surrounded by screens showing news coverage from around the world. The headlines told a story of upheaval and revelation. Global markets stabilize as consortium control ends. World leaders address decades of hidden influence. Project Oracle, the AI system that predicted its own downfall. Alexander entered, carrying fresh coffee and looking more relaxed than he had in years. The weight of the sterling legacy had lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a new sense of purpose. The FBI just finished interviewing Richard, he reported, handing Catherine a cup. He's cooperating fully, trying to save himself by exposing every consortium secret he knows. How predictable, Victoria said, entering from a conference call. The man who taught you that power was everything is now trading whatever power he has left for leniency. Catherine pulled up Richard's statement on her screen. He's still trying to justify everything. Says the consortium's control was necessary, that they were protecting humanity from itself. That's what they all say, Marcus added, joining them with Sarah Chen. Every member we arrest, every operative we interview, they genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. Sarah nodded, her FBI badge catching the morning light. The scale of their influence is staggering. Political movements, technological advancement, social change. They tried to control it all. It'll take years to fully understand the impact. But that's the point, isn't it? Catherine looked up from the screens. Now we get to understand it together, openly, instead of having our lives manipulated from the shadows. Victoria moved to the windows, looking out at the city below. People were going about their lives, but there was a different energy now. The truth hadn't brought chaos as the consortium had predicted, but rather a collective awakening. Your father believed this would happen, she said softly. Not just the exposure of the consortium, but how humanity would respond. Project Oracle showed them controlling the future through fear, but James saw people choosing hope instead. Alexander joined her at the window. We're already seeing it. Companies previously controlled by the consortium are being reformed with transparency measures. Corrupted institutions are being cleansed. People everywhere are demanding truth. And choosing to be better, Marcus added. My own security teams, the ones who laid down their weapons when they learned the truth, they're now helping us protect whistleblowers and expose remaining consortium cells. Sarah checked her phone as it buzzed with updates. Diana's testimony is proving invaluable. Once she chose truth over control, she became our key to understanding the consortium's deeper operations. Catherine stood, moving to join her parents at the window. But it's not just about exposing past control. We have to help build something better. She pulled up James's journal on a nearby screen, displaying a passage she'd discovered hidden within its pages. Project Oracle's greatest revelation wasn't about the power of control, but about humanity's capacity for growth. When people choose truth, when they face their challenges with courage and compassion, they create a future far better than any system could predict. Victoria touched the screen gently. He left us a roadmap, didn't he? Not just for exposing the consortium, but for what comes after. A foundation built on truth instead of power, Alexander mused, using our resources to support transparency, to protect whistleblowers, to encourage ethical innovation. To help people make informed choices about their own future, Catherine finished. That's what the Maxwell Crawford Foundation will do. The others turned to her in surprise. Victoria's eyes filled with tears at the combined names, her company and James's legacy united in their daughter's vision. The world is going to need guidance, Catherine continued. Not control, but support. Help in understanding the truth and choosing better paths forward. That's what Dad believed in, what he died fighting for. We can honor that by helping others embrace freedom instead of fear. Marcus smiled. James would be proud, not just of what you did, but of what you're choosing to build. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Speaking of building, the first wave of Project Oracle's code is being released to ethical AI researchers worldwide. They're already finding ways to use its prediction capabilities to help humanity instead of controlling it. The consortium's greatest weapon, Alexander observed, transformed into a tool for good. Victoria wrapped an arm around Catherine. Just like the sterling fortune will be, transformed into a force for truth instead of power. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the family as they stood together, looking out at a world forever changed by their choices. In the streets below, people moved with new awareness, their eyes open to both the challenges and possibilities ahead. Catherine held her father's journal close, feeling the weight of his vision and the lightness of true freedom. The future wasn't controlled or predicted anymore. It was waiting to be shaped by millions of individual choices, each one a step towards something better. Dad's last message in the journal, she said softly, wasn't just about exposing truth. It was about what we choose to do with freedom once we have it. Victoria and Alexander stood close, their own choices having led them back to love and purpose. Marcus and Sarah, siblings reunited by the fight for truth, shared knowing looks. They were all part of something larger now, not a controlling force like the consortium, but a supporting one, helping humanity write its own story. The screens behind them showed a world awakening to new possibilities, and in that moment, they knew. Project Oracle's greatest prediction wasn't about control or chaos, but about the incredible things people could achieve when they were free to choose their own path forward. Chapter 18, Legacies. 1 month after the fall of the consortium, Catherine stood at a podium in the newly renovated Maxwell Crawford Foundation headquarters. The building, once a symbol of Victoria's revenge and Richard's power, had been transformed into a beacon of transparency and hope. The audience before her included journalists, activists, technology experts, and reformed consortium members who had chosen to help build a better future. But more importantly, it included her family, Victoria and Alexander in the front row, their hands clasped together, and Marcus with Sarah beside them, representing the alliance between truth seekers and law enforcement. 25 years, Ago, Catherine began, her voice steady and clear. My father discovered something extraordinary. Not just the existence of Project Oracle or the consortium's control, but humanity's incredible capacity for growth and change. He believed that, when given the truth, people would choose to be better, to build something greater than any system of control could envision. She gestured to the screens behind her, showing real-time data from around the world, transparent governance initiatives, ethical AI development, grassroots movements for truth and accountability. The past month has proven him right, as the consortium's influence has been exposed and dismantled. We haven't seen the chaos they predicted. Instead, we've witnessed an unprecedented surge of human cooperation and innovation. People everywhere are choosing to face our challenges together, with honesty and hope. Victoria watched her daughter with pride, seeing James's spirit shining through every word. Alexander squeezed her hand, both of them feeling the weight of their own choices and the freedom of truth. The Maxwell Crawford Foundation isn't here to control or guide humanity's path, Catherine continued. We're here to support your choices, to protect truth seekers, to ensure that power can never again hide in shadows. The resources once used to manipulate will now be used to illuminate. She held up her father's journal. This book contains more than just the evidence that brought down the consortium. It contains a vision of what humanity can achieve when we choose truth over fear, cooperation over control, love over power. Every page reflects my father's belief that the future belongs not to those who would control it, but to those brave enough to face it honestly. Marcus nodded from his seat, thinking of his own father and the complex truth Victoria had finally shared about his death. The pain hadn't disappeared, but understanding had brought healing, showing him that truth, however difficult, was always better than comfortable lies. Project Oracle predicted multiple futures, Catherine went on, but it couldn't predict the most important thing, the individual choices each of us would make when confronted with truth. Every person who chose to lay down weapons, to expose corruption, to help build something better, you've all proven that humanity's potential exceeds any system's predictions. Sarah smiled, thinking of Diana Voss and other consortium members who had transformed from controllers to contributors, helping to create transparent institutions instead of shadowy power structures. The Foundation's first initiative, Catherine announced, is the Truth and Reconciliation Program. We're establishing a global network of support for whistleblowers, investigative journalists, and ethical innovators. The consortium's former safe houses will become sanctuaries for truth seekers. Their surveillance systems will be repurposed to protect those fighting corruption. Their resources will fund independent journalism and transparent research. She touched the screen beside her, revealing the Foundation's structure. A completely transparent organization with public oversight and democratic input. But our most important work isn't institutional. It's personal. Every day we all face choices between truth and comfort, between courage and control. The consortium fell not just because we exposed them, but because people everywhere chose to be better than their predictions. Victoria wiped tears from her eyes as Catherine unveiled the Foundation's motto, written in James's own handwriting from his journal. Truth sets us free, love shows us how. My father gave his life believing in humanity's potential. My mother spent 20 years fighting for the chance to prove him right. Now it's our turn. Not to control the future, but to face it together, with honesty and hope. The audience rose in applause, but Catherine wasn't finished. She looked directly at her parents, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. The greatest prediction Project Oracle ever made wasn't about power or control. It was about a family torn apart by lies finding its way back to truth. About love being stronger than fear. About the extraordinary things ordinary people can achieve when they're free to choose their own path. She held up her father's journal one last time. This story isn't over. It's just beginning. Every day we write new pages with our choices, our courage, our commitment to truth. The future isn't something to be controlled. It's something we create together, one honest choice at a time. As the applause washed over them, Victoria and Alexander joined their daughter on stage. Marcus and Sarah followed, the family that had brought down the consortium standing together as a symbol of truth's triumph over power. But more than that, they stood as a testament to James Crawford's greatest insight, that humanity's capacity for love, courage, and redemption would always overcome any attempt to control it. The future wasn't written by predictions or power, but by people brave enough to choose truth and love above all else. The morning sun streamed through the foundations, windows illuminating the motto that would guide generations to come. Truth sets us free, love shows us how. In that light, they could almost see James smiling, his vision of a free future finally becoming reality. Chapter 19. Full Circle. 6 months after the establishment of the Maxwell Crawford Foundation, Victoria stood on the streets of Paris, her heart racing as she approached a small café near the Louvre. It was here, 25 years ago, that James had planned to meet her before his disappearance. Now, on a crisp autumn morning, she was keeping that long-delayed appointment. Catherine walked beside her, wearing the same determined expression James had worn in his final days. Alexander followed a few steps behind, giving mother and daughter space for this moment while remaining close enough to support them. The café had changed little over the decades. The same green awning, the same wrought iron chairs, the same view of the museum's magnificent architecture. Victoria's fingers trembled as she touched the back of a specific chair, the one where James had always sat during their meetings. "This is where it happened?" Catherine asked softly. Victoria nodded. "Your father would order coffee and croissants, spread his notes across the table, and work for hours. He loved the energy of Paris, the sense of history and revolution in the air." She smiled at a distant memory. "He said truth was like art. It belonged to everyone, not just the powerful." They sat at the table ordering coffee in quiet French. Alexander joined them, placing a protective hand over Victoria's. "The last time I was here," Victoria continued, "I waited for hours. When James didn't come, I knew something had happened, but I also knew what he wanted me to do." She reached into her bag, withdrawing James's journal. Everything that followed, my marriage to Alexander, the years in hiding, building the company with Marcus, it was all part of protecting his legacy until you were ready. Catherine touched the journal's worn cover. "And now we're back where it began." "Not just for closure," Victoria said. "There's one last piece of the puzzle, something James left here that even the consortium never found." She opened the journal to a page filled with seemingly random numbers. These aren't just coordinates or security codes, they're measurements. Precise distances from this exact table to specific points in the Louvre. Alexander studied the numbers. "A map?" "A treasure hunt," Catherine realized, her eyes lighting up with understanding. Dad loved museums. He believed art was humanity's greatest expression of truth. Victoria smiled. "He hid something in the Louvre itself, something not even Project Oracle knew about. He told me that when the time was right, when the truth was finally free, we should come back here together." They finished their coffee and walked to the museum, Victoria leading them through the grand galleries with purpose. The measurements in James's journal guided them past priceless artworks, through corridors of history, until they reached a small, easily overlooked section of Renaissance art. Here, Victoria stopped before a modest painting of a family. "Count the steps from our table, factor in the angles, this is it." Catherine examined the painting. At first glance it seemed unremarkable compared to the masterpieces surrounding it. But as she looked closer, she noticed something in the background. A desk covered in papers, a window showing a cityscape, a father teaching his daughter to read. "The frame," Victoria pointed to a barely visible seam. "James had connections in the museum. He arranged this decades ago." Carefully, reverently, she pressed a hidden catch in the frame. A small compartment opened, revealing a USB drive and a letter in James's handwriting. Catherine's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. Her father's words, written 25 years ago, filled the page. "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, then everything I hoped for has come to pass. The truth is free. The future is unbound, and you've proven that love is stronger than fear. But Project Oracle showed me one more thing, a truth I couldn't include in the evidence, couldn't risk the consortium finding. It showed me you, Catherine, not just exposing their control, but helping build something better. The foundation you've created, the work you're doing, I saw it all. Not because it was predicted or controlled, but because I believed in the power of truth and love to shape a better future. The USB drive contains my final gift, not more evidence or secrets, but something more precious, hope. I recorded messages, for you, for Victoria, for the family I knew you would build. I wanted you to hear my voice, to know that every choice you made, every step of this journey, was guided not by Project Oracle's predictions, but by your own hearts. The consortium believed in controlling the future. I believed in you. With endless love and pride, your father, James. Tears streamed down Catherine's face as Victoria held her close. Alexander wrapped his arms around them both, the family united in a moment James had envisioned decades ago. Through the museum's windows, Paris spread out before them. The same city where James had discovered the truth, where he had made his final sacrifice, and where now finally his family had come full circle. Victoria tucked the USB drive safely away, knowing that its contents would bring healing and closure. But the real treasure was this moment, 3 people who had chosen truth over power, love over fear, standing together in the city where it all began. He knew, Catherine whispered, holding the letter close, he knew we would find our way here. Not because it was predicted, Victoria smiled through her tears, but because he believed in the power of love to overcome any obstacle, to bridge any distance, to heal any wound. Alexander looked at his family, not bound by blood, but by choice, by truth, by love, and finally understood what James had known all along. The future wasn't something to be controlled, but something to be created together, one honest choice at a time. Outside, the City of Light buzzed with life, its streets filled with people making their own choices, writing their own stories. And in a quiet corner of the Louvre, a family stood united, their journey coming full circle, their legacy of truth and love echoing through time. Chapter 20. Tomorrow's Promise. Back in New York, the Maxwell Crawford Foundation's headquarters hummed with purpose. The USB drive James had hidden in Paris had yielded not just personal messages, but a vision for the future that was already taking shape. Catherine sat in what had once been Victoria's office, now transformed into a collaborative space where truth seekers from around the world could work together. The screens that had once displayed market data and security feeds now showed a different kind of information: global initiatives for transparency, educational programs teaching critical thinking, support networks for whistleblowers and journalists. The foundation had become exactly what James had envisioned, a force for truth and positive change. Victoria entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "The Paris video is ready whenever you want to share it with the team." Catherine nodded, thinking of the message they'd found in the Louvre. James had recorded himself explaining his hopes for the foundation, his vision of a world where truth and love would guide humanity's progress. But he'd also included personal moments, his joy at Victoria's pregnancy, his dreams for his unborn daughter, his faith in the future they would build. "It's strange," Catherine said, accepting the coffee, "watching Dad's videos, hearing his voice. It's like he's been with us all along, guiding us not through control or manipulation, but through love and trust." Victoria sat beside her daughter. That's what separated him from the consortium. They tried to control the future through fear. James shaped it through hope. The office door opened as Alexander arrived with Marcus and Sarah. They had just returned from overseeing the transformation of a former consortium safe house into a sanctuary for investigative journalists. "The renovation is complete," Marcus reported. "The same security systems that once protected secrets will now protect truth-tellers." Sarah smiled. "And the first group of journalists moves in next week. They're already collaborating on investigations into remaining corruption worldwide." Alexander moved to stand behind Catherine's chair, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "James would be proud, not just of what we've built, but of how we've built it, with transparency, cooperation, and trust." Catherine pulled up the Foundation's latest project on her screens, a global education initiative teaching young people about the importance of truth, critical thinking, and ethical choices. The program was already being adopted by schools worldwide. Project Oracle predicted many futures, she said thoughtfully, but I think this is the one Dad hoped for most. People choosing to learn, to grow, to face challenges together, instead of being controlled by fear. Victoria touched the screen, bringing up an image of the Foundation's growing network. Points of light spread across a world map, each representing a person or organization working for truth and positive change. The consortium saw humanity as something to be managed, she observed. But look at what people can achieve when they're free to choose their own path. Speaking of choices, Marcus added, Diana sent another message from Witness Protection. More former consortium members are coming forward, wanting to help build something better. Sarah nodded. They're choosing truth over power, just like Dad predicted they would. The morning sun streamed through the office windows, illuminating the family as they gathered around Catherine's desk. On the wall hung a new piece of art, the small Renaissance painting from the Louvre, donated by the museum in honor of James's vision. Beside it, his words were inscribed in elegant script. Truth sets us free, love shows us how. You know what I think about most? Catherine said softly. Not the big achievements or the global changes, but the small moments. A daughter kneeling to help someone in need. A father choosing love over power. A mother protecting truth until the world was ready for it. Victoria squeezed her hand. Those moments of choice, that's where real change happens. Not through grand predictions or controlled outcomes, but through individual acts of courage and love. Alexander wrapped an arm around Victoria. And now we get to help others make those choices, face those moments with hope instead of fear. The screens behind them showed a world transforming, not through control or manipulation, but through millions of people choosing truth, choosing courage, choosing love. The Foundation wasn't directing this change, it was supporting it, nurturing it, helping people find their own path to truth. Dad's final message, Catherine smiled, wasn't just about exposing the consortium or sharing his love for us. It was about tomorrow, about believing that each new day brings another chance to choose truth, to build trust, to love boldly. She stood, looking out at the city where their journey had begun. Below, people moved with new awareness, their eyes open to both the challenges and possibilities ahead. The future wasn't controlled or predicted anymore. It was being written by countless individual choices, each one a step toward something better. Victoria and Alexander stood with their daughter, united not by blood or power, but by the choices they'd made and the love they'd fought to preserve. Marcus and Sarah joined them, the family that truth had built, looking out at a world forever changed by courage and hope. The morning light caught the words on the wall, making them glow like a promise. Truth sets us free, love shows us how. In that moment, they knew that while their story had come full circle, it wasn't ending. It was transforming into something even more powerful, a legacy of truth, courage, and love that would echo through generations to come. For in the end, Project Oracle's greatest prediction wasn't about control or chaos, power or resistance. It was about the incredible things people could achieve when they were free to choose their own path, guided not by fear, but by love, not by control, but by truth. And in that freedom, in those choices, in that love, the future would always hold more hope than any system could predict. Chapter 21. Echoes of Change. 1 year after the fall of the consortium, Catherine stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly. The Maxwell Crawford Foundation's first global summit on truth and transparency had brought together leaders, activists, and reformed consortium members from around the world. The grand hall was filled with people who had chosen truth over power, love over fear. In the front row, Victoria and Alexander sat proudly watching their daughter. Beside them, Marcus and Sarah represented the new alliance between law enforcement and transparency advocates. Even Diana Voss was present, now working to help other former consortium members transition to ethical roles. A year ago, Catherine began, We faced a choice between control and freedom, between fear and truth. The consortium believed humanity needed to be guided, controlled, protected from itself. But my father, James Crawford, saw something different. He saw our capacity for growth, for courage, for love. The screens behind her displayed images from the past year. Corrupt systems being dismantled, transparent institutions rising in their place, communities coming together to face challenges honestly and openly. Project Oracle predicted many possible futures, she continued, but it couldn't predict the most important thing, the individual choices each of us would make when confronted with truth. Every person in this room has a story of choosing courage over comfort, honesty over power. Victoria squeezed Alexander's hand, remembering their own journey from deception to truth, from broken trust to renewed love. The past year had been one of healing, not just for them, but for countless others affected by the consortium's control. The Foundation isn't here to create a perfect world, Catherine said, her voice carrying James's passion for truth. We're here to support people in making their own choices, facing their own challenges, building their own futures, because that's what my father believed in. Not a controlled utopia, but a free world where love and truth guide our path forward. She held up her father's journal, its pages now digitized and shared with truth seekers worldwide. This book didn't just contain evidence against the consortium, it contained a vision of what humanity could achieve when freed from control and fear. Today, we're living that vision. The audience listened intently as Catherine outlined the Foundation's expanding mission, supporting investigative journalism, protecting whistleblowers, promoting transparency in governance and technology. But more than programs or initiatives, she spoke about the human spirit's endless capacity for growth and positive change. The world isn't perfect, she acknowledged. We face new challenges every day, but we face them together, with honesty and hope, knowing that truth and love are stronger than any system of control. As she spoke, the morning sun streamed through the UN's magnificent windows, illuminating the gathering of people who had chosen to be part of something greater than themselves. In that light, they could almost see James smiling, his vision of a free future becoming more real with each passing day. The future wasn't written by predictions or controlled by fear anymore. It was being created moment by moment, choice by choice, by people brave enough to choose truth, love, and hope above all else. And in those choices, in that courage, in that love, tomorrow's promise continued to unfold. Chapter 22. Seeds of Hope. After the UN summit, the family gathered in Central Park, at the very spot where Victoria and Catherine had first reunited on that fateful day. The park was filled with people enjoying the autumn afternoon, each one free to write their own story, make their own choices. Victoria sat on a bench, watching a street performer share his art with passers-by. Remember when I used to sit here watching the world go by? Even then I knew this place would be important to our story. Catherine joined her mother, their shoulders touching. Because it's where truth finally broke through all the lies. Because it's where love proved stronger than fear, Victoria corrected softly. When you knelt to help someone you thought was a stranger, you showed the same compassion your father had. That's when I knew you were ready. Alexander stood nearby, his posture relaxed, free from the weight of the sterling legacy. And now look at what that moment started. Not just the fall of the consortium, but a worldwide movement toward truth and transparency. Marcus approached with Sarah, carrying coffee for everyone. The latest reports show more former consortium members coming forward every day. They're not just confessing, they're actively helping build better systems. Because they've seen what's possible, Sarah added. When Diana chose truth over power, it started a chain reaction. People realized they didn't have to be bound by past choices or old loyalties. Catherine pulled out her father's journal, its pages now dog-eared from constant reference. Dad wrote about this. He said truth was like a seed. Once planted, it would grow on its own, spreading hope and courage wherever it took root. She opened to a passage she'd read countless times. The future isn't something to be controlled or predicted. It's something we nurture together, like a garden where truth and love can flourish freely. Victoria touched the journal gently. James never saw Project Oracle as just a prediction system. He saw it as proof that humanity's potential was limitless when freed from fear and control. And now we get to help that potential grow, Alexander said, watching a group of children playing nearby. The Foundation's educational programs, the transparency initiatives, the support networks for truth seekers, they're all ways of planting more seeds. Marcus smiled. My security teams used to protect secrets. Now they protect people brave, enough to expose them. That's the kind of change your father believed in, Catherine. A cool breeze rustled the autumn leaves, carrying the sounds of the city, people talking, laughing, living freely. In the year since the consortium's fall, New York had changed, not dramatically or suddenly, but in countless small ways as people embraced truth and rejected manipulation. You know what I think about most? Catherine said, looking around at her family. Not the big victories or global changes, but moments like this. People choosing to be honest, to be brave, to love without fear. Victoria leaned against her daughter. Those choices. That's what James fought for. Not a perfect world, but one where we're free to choose our own path, guided by truth and love. Alexander sat beside them, taking Victoria's hand. And now his legacy lives on, not just through the foundation or the changes we've helped create, but through every person who chooses truth over fear. Sarah checked her phone as it buzzed with updates. Speaking of legacy, the first class of James Crawford Scholars graduates next month, 30 young journalists and activists ready to carry the torch forward. And the Project Oracle data, Marcus asked. Catherine smiled. Being used exactly as Dad hoped, not to control the future, but to understand how our choices shape it. The ethical AI team is doing amazing work, showing how technology can support human potential instead of restricting it. The sun began to set over Central Park, painting the sky in shades of hope. Victoria looked at her family, the daughter who had proven love's power, the husband who had chosen truth over legacy, the friends who had become family through shared purpose. James would love this, she said softly, not because it was predicted or planned, but because it grew naturally from seeds of truth and love he planted long ago. They sat together as darkness fell and stars appeared above the city. Each point of light seemed to echo James's vision, countless individual choices illuminating the path forward, creating a future brighter than any system could predict. For in the end, the greatest power wasn't in controlling tomorrow, but in choosing to face it together, with honesty and hope, guided by the timeless wisdom James had left them. Truth sets us free, love shows us how. Chapter 23, The Path Forward. 5 years had passed since the day Catherine first saw her mother on that Manhattan street. The Maxwell Crawford Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, its mission of truth and transparency spreading, hope across the globe. But on this particular morning, Catherine had returned to where it all began, the small café near Le Petit Jardin. The street was quieter now, the morning sun casting gentle shadows across the sidewalk where a daughter's compassion had sparked a revolution of truth. Victoria and Alexander sat with her at an outdoor table, their faces relaxed and happy, showing the peace that comes from living authentically. Everything's different now, Catherine mused, watching people pass by. Yet in some ways nothing's changed at all. People still face choices every day between truth and comfort, between love and fear. Victoria smiled, thinking of James's last message, found in the Louvre years ago. That's what your father understood. Real change isn't about controlling the future. It's about helping people make better choices, one moment at a time. Alexander wrapped an arm around his wife. And those choices ripple outward. Look at Richard. He finally chose truth, helping us dismantle the last remnants of the consortium's influence. Speaking of influence, Catherine said, checking her phone, the latest Foundation report shows something amazing. The Global Truth Index, measuring transparency in governments, corporations, and institutions, has reached its highest level ever. Victoria wasn't surprised, because people have seen what's possible when we reject control and embrace honesty. Every whistleblower we protect, every journalist we support, every corrupt system we help expose, they all show others that choosing truth is worth the risk. And love? Alexander asked softly, looking at his family. What would Project Oracle say about that? Catherine laughed, a sound full of joy and hope. I think Dad already told us. Love is the force that makes truth powerful. It's what gives us courage to face hard realities, to make difficult choices, to build something better. She opened her father's journal one last time, turning to the final page where James had written his most important message. To those who find this story, it isn't just about exposing control or revealing truth. It's about the incredible power of love to transform fear into courage, lies into honesty, broken trust into renewed faith. The future belongs to those brave enough to love freely, truly, completely. Victoria touched the words gently. He was right. The consortium fell, not just because we exposed them, but because people everywhere chose love over fear. They chose to trust, to hope, to believe in something better. Alexander looked out at the city stirring to life. And now, what's the next chapter? Catherine smiled, her father's determination shining in her eyes. We keep choosing truth. Keep supporting others who make that choice. Keep believing in the power of love to light the way forward. She stood, taking one last look at the spot where their story had turned. The morning sun caught her mother's silver hair, her father's gentle smile, making them glow with the kind of peace that comes from living truthfully. You know what Dad would say? She asked, her voice full of purpose. He'd say our story isn't over, it's just beginning. Every day brings new choices, new chances to choose truth over fear, love over control. And in those choices, we create tomorrow's hope. Victoria and Alexander stood with their daughter, ready to face whatever came next. Above them, the Paris sky was bright with promise, echoing James Crawford's enduring vision of a world where truth sets us free and love shows us how. The end. Beloved listeners, we hope this story of truth, love, and courage has touched your hearts. The journey of Catherine, Victoria, and Alexander reminds us that real change begins with individual choices, moments when we decide to embrace truth over comfort, love over fear. For more inspiring stories that explore the depths of human potential and the power of authentic choices, click the subscribe button to your left. Join our community of storytellers and truth seekers, where each tale opens new windows into the incredible capacity of the human spirit. If this story moved you, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue bringing meaningful narratives that challenge, inspire, and illuminate the path forward. Remember, just as the Maxwell Crawford Foundation believed in the power of individual choices to change the world, your choice to engage with and share these stories creates ripples of positive change. Subscribe now to be part of this journey of truth, courage, and love. Together, let's keep choosing truth, one story at a time. Chapter 23. The Path Forward. 5 years had passed since the day Catherine first saw her mother on that Manhattan street. The Maxwell Crawford Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, its mission of truth and transparency spreading hope across the globe. But on this particular morning, Catherine had returned to where it all began, the small café near Le Petit Jardin. The street was quieter now, the morning sun casting gentle shadows across the sidewalk where a daughter's compassion had sparked a revolution of truth. Victoria and Alexander sat with her at an outdoor table, their faces relaxed and happy, showing the peace that comes from living authentically. Everything's different now, Catherine mused, watching people pass by. Yet in some ways, nothing's changed at all. People still face choices every day between truth and comfort, between love and fear. Victoria smiled, thinking of James's last message found in the Louvre years ago. That's what your father understood. Real change isn't about controlling the future. It's about helping people make better choices, one moment at a time. Alexander wrapped an arm around his wife. And those choices ripple outward. Look at Richard. Even he, finally, chose truth, helping us dismantle the last remnants of the consortium's influence. Speaking of influence, Catherine said, checking her phone, the latest Foundation report shows something amazing. The Global Truth Index, measuring transparency in governments, corporations, and institutions, has reached its highest level ever. Victoria wasn't surprised. Because people have seen what's possible when we reject control and embrace honesty. Every whistleblower we protect, every journalist we support, every corrupt system we help expose, they all show others that choosing truth is worth the risk. And love? Alexander asked softly, looking at his family. What would Project Oracle say about that? Catherine laughed, a sound full of joy and hope. I think Dad already told us. Love is the force that makes truth powerful. It's what gives us courage to face hard realities, to make difficult choices, to build something better. She opened her father's journal one last time, turning to the final page where James had written his most important message. To those who find this story, it isn't just about exposing control or revealing truth. It's about the incredible power of love to transform fear into courage, lies into honesty, broken trust into renewed faith. The future belongs to those brave enough to love freely, truly, completely. Victoria touched the words gently. He was right. The consortium fell, not just because we exposed them, but because people everywhere chose love over fear. They chose to trust, to hope, to believe in something better. Alexander looked out at the city stirring to life. And now? What's the next chapter? Catherine smiled, her father's determination shining in her eyes. We keep choosing truth. Keep supporting others who make that choice. Keep believing in the power of love to light the way forward. She stood, taking one last look at the spot where their story had turned. The morning sun caught her mother's silver hair, her father's gentle smile, making them glow with the kind of peace that comes from living truthfully. You know what Dad would say? She asked, her voice full of purpose. He'd say our story isn't over, it's just beginning. Every day brings new choices, new chances to choose truth over fear, love over control. And in those choices, we create tomorrow's hope. Victoria and Alexander stood with their daughter, ready to face whatever came next. Above them, the Paris sky was bright with promise, echoing James Crawford's enduring vision of a world where truth sets us free and love shows us how.